Mmusi Maimane.
Yes, hi, how are you?
I'm well in yourself, Salvan here from the Roof on Top channel.
From the way?
Roof on Top channel. Social media. I would like to ask you a couple of questions. You have a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Just to kick off, the sermon that you had, I think
I just want to get this correctly. So you are recording this for the purpose of social media, right?
yeah, but you also post on social media with your One South Africa.
Yes, I'm not denying that. I just want to understand.
Yes.
I've never been interviewed on this platform before. So
Okay.
I want to understand how it works. I don't know which social media, where does it go, etc.
Goes Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube.
Okay.
All right, you excited?
No, that's fine. We can go.
Okay. A few years ago, you had a sermon in Australia, I believe, where you were preaching about Jesus and how he turned water into wine. You remember?
Yes.
Yes, that was a fantastic one. Are you still a pastor, by the way?
No, I'm still involved as a Christian and serve in a local church. I'm not preaching. But,
all right.
Yeah, still involved. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. The Arabs, I believe, they turned water in the desert. They created water. I think it's a profound message where Jesus turned water into wine. If we first start off, we talk about the blue gold, which is obviously water. City of Cape Town, you probably saw the recent post on social media. I think Maverick also posted an article, which is quite old one, which just resurfaced now. Apparently the city made 11.4 billion on water levies. That was in 2009. I believe you were still part of that, part of the DA that time. Was Auntie Patrice de Lille also part of that?
I think the management of water was left up to Patricia de Lille, and she, at the time of mayor, was mayor during the water crisis. And I would urge that questions pertaining to water and water tariffs must be directed to her.
Oh wow, that is fantastic. Also a bit confusing revelation. Yeah, okay, so I'll continue to direct it to her. For the last 4 years I've been asking about the water. I haven't received any feedback as yet. Anyways, if we can focus on your situation,
I mean, for context purposes,
yeah,
you must remember when I was leader of the DA, I don't set the city's
yeah,
water tariff policy.
yeah, I understand.
I dealt with the broader crisis at the time,
Okay.
from the sense of saying how do we nationally secure water to a city that needed it. Remember, water is a national competence.
Yeah,
So when you want to understand water tariffs
Yeah.
and the financials of the city, I think it would be a bit
all right.
unfair to expect me to have to work on that, because then
Yeah.
I would have to be running the city myself.
100%. You have to delegate at some point. Look, there was one thing that really bothered me at the time, and if we can just quickly step back before we get to the One Africa situation. I felt personally, you were the leader of the DA. I'm certain there were a lot of complexities, a lot of issues, and some of them obviously resurfaced with Tony Leon publishing his book. When you left, you started with Herman Masaba, and now you've got the One Africa. I'm sure there's a lot of people in my situation that looked in from the outside, almost like you watching a rugby or a soccer game. You left, and I felt that you could have changed things from the inside, and you could have demolished whatever structures or whatever hindrances you had at the time, and fight and change this thing. Why didn't you decide to leave, Mmusi?
First and foremost, you spend a number of years fighting to change, and we'd worked hard to achieve that. There does come a point upon which you realize that, as I said on the day, to say that I didn't believe that was the best vehicle to bring about a reconciled South Africa.
All right.
Remember, the fight in this country is never always about the salvation of a political party.
Okay.
Political parties start off as movements, they become monuments eventually. And ultimately, if you want to save a monument, you lose the opportunity of new thinking. That's why we started One South Africa, because I believe that it was better to fight the battle from the outside.
From the outside in.
History will prove that.
Okay. Now,
South Africa doesn't have, as things stand, at this point in time, a post-liberation movement formation that is able to say it is non-racial in style and character and is able to take this country forward.
all right. Okay. Now, your movement, One South Africa, how do you think you're going to change things from the outside in if people aren't able to vote for you? Because it's not a political party at the end of the day.
History has been filled with movements that have changed things from the outside in.
Okay.
And as I said to you quite categorically, that we will be working with a number of independent candidates because I believe democracy must be brought back to the people.
Okay.
Direct democracy. So the only question on the table is whether they've got candidates and communities who can stand for election.
All right.
That must be the focus.
Okay. So you're going to always like lobbying for that attention and drive the agenda on the table, try to influence from the outside in. Is that what you're saying?
Influence direct democracy. So
Okay.
if you live in Kelsriver as an argument,
Yeah.
you are able to nominate your own candidate and let that candidate be voted for.
Yeah. All right.
And that candidate must be voted by the community, and I will support and work with that candidate to
Okay.
make change.
I get it.
That's what I'm working towards.
Okay. So then you can exercise the influence directly with the community that's eventually going to go out and vote. Yeah.
Aren't we tired? Aren't all of us tired of councillors who are elected in communities and then they leave?
I mean, you're spot on, and some of us don't even know who our councillor is, and it's a disgrace. I just recently bought a book, 8,000 Days. I'm not sure if you read it, Tony Hurd. It looks like I bought the wrong book, but this is an interesting book that I'm reading now. The book that Tony Leon wrote about you, I'm not sure if you read it yet. We only saw now what we obviously heard in the media. For him to say that, or to allude that you were an experiment as a black person, how did that make you feel?
I mean, I think I've made I think a remark like that is offensive and dehumanizing, because if you want to suggest something is an experiment, you must then be willing to affirm two other statements. There's one where someone is the experimenter, and therefore Mr. Leon must tell us who those people are.
Okay.
And secondly, you must tell us what the intended outcome of the experiment must be.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to prove something. And ultimately, I think it is dehumanizing from the perspective that you cannot sit back in 2021 argue strongly that human beings are experiments.
Yeah.
It is offensive. And certainly, if you are so, but where I sit is this is part of the past. This is part of a group of people who only saw people as projects and experiments. And my focus is on building the future.
100%.
Precisely for that reason, when you say to me, why do you leave?
Okay.
Because at some point you must sit back and say, are you willing to stand up for your convictions and work with people who want to see a different future?
Yes. I recently met with Glenn Snyman. I'm not sure if you know the story of Glenn Snyman. He's a school teacher that applied for a job as a principal. I think it's in Oudtshoorn. He was on the news. He's challenging, he also wrote a book, A Blind Man's Race. He's challenging the Z83 form in terms of white, black, colored, and Indian. So you basically, when you apply for a job, when you go into the bank, do an application, you have to tick the box. So now what they recently did was they added another block, which is other. Now you as a black man having a white wife, Natalie, and your 3 children, do you consider your children as colored as me, or as mixed race, or as other?
I consider them as mixed race. The choice for how they identify themselves becomes their own choice.
Okay.
Because as all of us know, even the definition of colored can vary from community to community.
Yeah.
There might be other colored South Africans who identify with the Malay component
Yes.
of being colored. There are other colored South Africans that identify as a mixture of black and white. There are other colored South Africans. So the term is diverse in and of itself. But the constitutional provision is self-identification, and therefore kids are entitled to have their view on that matter.
Look, obviously this thing is close to home with you and your wife and your children, right? Now, what I want to ask you is, if you now look at this whole situation, you were, in charge of the Democratic Alliance, and I ask this to all the leaders and everyone that I get to speak to: why do you guys never address the issue of the colored people in terms of the proper identification, what it needs? Because this thing happened in the 50s. Suddenly colored people are now labeled as colored. You know what I'm saying? Some say we are all South Africans, but there is the difference. If you look at the Khoi and the San and the history of South Africa, why did you not, as a leader in Parliament, address the issue of how colored people are labeled and how it affects our reality? Because if you look at the greater schemes of things, the hurt that you and your wife and your children must be going through now with this scenario where you are labeled as an experiment, I personally felt that for many years, until I decided I'm not going to be labeled as a person. I'm going to break through the barriers and work hard and do my own thing. How does it make you feel, Mmusi?
I think that when you fight for racial equality, you don't lose track of the fact that it's both a function of redress, economic inclusion, and ultimately the right for self-identification. Okay. Those values I've always held and fought for, regardless of which race it was. You can ask even people of the Khoi and the San. You can ask various communities. When asked, the question is, how do you choose to bring self-identification as the Constitution upholds? Yeah. But to achieve that, you are not going to do that, because racial exclusion and racial discrimination is not only a question of pigmentation, it's also a question of economic power and access to that economic power.
Yes.
So we fought hard for inclusion, so that, to your point, one day, of course, I want all of us to, first of all, be identified as South Africans. I want that for my kids. Yeah. But to get there, we must fight the barriers they are potentially going to face. Yeah. Where they live in communities that don't have good schools, how do I make sure that they are fighting to get into all schools, yes, regardless of where those schools are? Where they enter into business and they get treated like that, they don't know what they are doing. That right must be fought for. So to suggest that, in fact, we didn't fight enough, maybe it wasn't expressed as uniquely for colored South Africans, for Indian South Africans, or black South Africans, but make no mistake, I've always held a view that says that I will fight for all our people, all South Africans, because that's how I view them. I come from a family that is mixed. So how can I be hypocritical?
I understand.
In the view that says some must be treated differently than others. It would be self-defeating and hypocritical.
Yeah. If we can quickly touch on the fourth estate media, do you think the Democratic Alliance, if you look at overall, now that you're not within the DA anymore, do they own the fourth estate? The white elite, who owns the media in South Africa?
I think the reflection of that question is, I mean, if you want to look at ownership of the media, this is not unique to South Africa. It's a global phenomenon. I don't
100%.
think that it is uniquely owned by the DA. I don't actually think so. I think that our media interests and media ownership are well publicized for all to see. Because I can think of the Times Group, the Media 24, etc. The only question that we've got as a country is, how do we safeguard the independence of? Yeah. Because as things stand now, if political parties ever find themselves in a space where they can be able to control media interests, they will be able to control the narrative of society. So here's the great difficulty that we must answer for ourselves. Are we adding more publications that speak to people? And I think the liberalization of media has also been aided by social media, where people are able to communicate. Here we are on a platform that perhaps maybe up until recently, I've only heard about it now. Where you can communicate your ideas and ideals.
Yes,
so I think, to me, we need to safeguard the independence and the freedom of it to operate. Because when you lose that, you lose any prospect of freedom of speech being upheld.
Yeah, I think social media is also a powerful tool with especially now with the one-eyed devil. I call it the one-eyed devil because it's only one screen looking at you, and everyone is hooked into this thing, and everyone can express themselves. So I think it's going to be more difficult now for them to control, unless they go and create, which already is the case, the algorithms. You don't see certain things, your videos is not running like it used to because of algorithms. But just to finalize everything, Mmusi Maimane, do you think, in your experience, where you're standing now outside of the DA, is the Democratic Alliance a racist party?
I believe, frankly, that the entire political system of this country is one where it splits people on black parties and white parties. To think to be of a particular race makes you automatically racist.
Okay.
Simply saying that there's a genuine polarization of the political landscape, that people in this country can stand up and say this is a white party and it's a black party. That it's not sustainable. It's what doesn't aid our democratic project of reconciliation. What we need is a movement in the center. That's what One South Africa is seeking to do, to ensure that black people and white people can work together. The pronouncement on a party being racist or not is a separate matter in its entirety, because I don't genuinely believe that. Otherwise, I think the fundamental issue is that we've got these divisions politically.
All right.
And we've got to heal those. If we don't do those, because tomorrow, if you say to me that let's take typically the EFF, you just simply say it's a black party, and then the ANC is also a black party, then you say the DA and the Freedom Front Plus are white party, then what's the point of election?
Yeah. Do you think Julius Malema is a racist?
The point of elections will soon be a question of taking the census to go.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be aided on this particular interview to be able to classify this person as racist, that one is racist.
Yeah.
I abhor anyone who hates anyone on the basis of the color of their skin.
Yeah.
But it's not for me to be able to be labeling people left, right, and
I
center, saying
understand.
this one is that and that one is that.
Yeah,
But
because I was wanting to ask you about Alan Ziller. But yeah, the same goes for Julius.
Yeah. Okay.
Just the last question. Patricia de Lille, and we all watched the last public meeting that you guys had before you left and before she left, obviously. Sean August, Sia, Lazette and them, they all sued you for 1 million rand. What happened to that situation?
I don't know.
Okay, so that's non-existent at the point. Are you still talking to Auntie Patricia de Lille?
I've worked with her and I respect her in our country, and I think she's got a role to play.
Okay. Do you think she sold out to the ANC, taking that mayoral job?
No, I think I'm not sure where there are more and more questions coming out about different people.
Thanks for your time, Mmusi. Enjoy what's left of the Easter holiday with your wife Natalie and your 3 children. All right. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. All right. Goodbye. There you have it, guys. Mmusi Maimane.